All right, welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. And today, in honor of the upcoming Metallica show out at the stadium, that's exactly who we're doing, Metallica. Doesn't get any better than that. Let's bring in our special guest for today, none other than Mr. David Hans. Welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, this one, what was your take looking at the catalog as you started to go through it?
I think in my head, I pretty much had knew what was going to be the top of the list, but I definitely went back and listened to the last three or four albums again. So
Yeah, those are the ones that I probably played the least amount out of all the catalog. Those first four albums, five albums, always seem to get a lot of airplay.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, so that definitely had to go back and listen to it. And I find when you listen to songs, more the more you listen to it, the more you tend to actually start liking some of the stuff maybe that you didn't give a chance to at one point or another, which is very interesting. All right, so let's begin here. Metallica. We're going to take you through the catalog chronologically, and then after we're done here, we're going to give you our rankings and go from there.
okay.
So, yep, life begins with "Kill 'Em All" from Metallica, which came out in July of '83. Um, so this album kind of came out. It was on Megaforce Records, which was like an independent label at the time. And it sold pretty good because it got them a lot of notice, for an independent label. And at that time, that was one of the more bigger independent labels that seemed to be out there. And they had a lot of bands they had signed, and Metallica ended up topping the list here. This album eventually ended up going triple platinum is the latest ranking that I see here, and reached number 68 on the charts. And it features songs actually written by Dave Mustaine before he was kicked out of the band. So there's a few tracks from him on here he co-wrote with the band. What's your take on this album?
I always like this album. I mean, it's definitely a thrash classic. I mean, you can tell the production's pretty austere on it. James's voice is as high as it ever was. That's why I don't think they can perform a lot of that stuff live anymore. But you just can't sing like that anymore. So
Yeah, yeah, that's true.
But yeah, they originally wanted to call the album "Metal Up Your Ass," but the record company wouldn't do it. So
All right, and so that one came out, got them on the map, and then from there, it seems like it took off like a rocket ship with their next album. That would be "Ride the Lightning." Came out in July of 1984. So a year later, almost a year to the date, pretty much. So this album, was also actually on Megaforce Records, and then eventually, once they got put on the big label, it got re-released and all that under the Elektra brand. But it ended up at this point, it's up to six times platinum. It didn't chart too high up on the charts because at this point in time, this kind of music wasn't exactly in favor. But that just goes to show you, landing at number 48, for a band like this, where the music wasn't all like this out there, to land on the top 200 Billboard charts at 48. That was a pretty significant thing at this point in time, because you got to remember in '84, you got a lot of the pop, the British pop, heavy metal was not really the in thing at that point. It took a while before it really started to become, but this was like the beginning of where the shift towards heavy metal really started to take place. And Ride the Lightning, definitely. That's you mentioned the word Ride the Lightning, and right away people just get good feelings. It's just a great album. What was your feeling on this one when you
yeah,
first heard it?
this album. I mean, the creative leap between the first album to this album is highly impressive. I mean, the arrangements got more complex. They were getting more ambitious with the songwriting and everything. You could definitely tell that they were kind of coming into what we would know as Metallica later on. So
Yep, yep. Ride the Lightning definitely you know helped pave the way after Kill 'Em All. It's like from there, it's just like phew, everything took right off. And then speaking of taking off, probably they consider the grand album of them all out of the catalog, I would have to say, is the one you're holding up right there. Master of Puppets came out 1986. So it took them a little while to record this one as opposed to the previous two, but well worth the wait. I remember like picking it up the day it came out. Went right down to Cavage's in Southgate Plaza. Got in there, got the cassette at the time because that's what I had, cassettes,
Mhm.
and it was all from there. This album definitely was the one that everybody was already talking about before it even came out. They were saying how great this album was, and then you started to read the reviews, and everybody just praised this album, and you brought it up from Ride the Lightning to to this level here. How did you acquire yours?
I actually got the original vinyl copy from my aunt. She gave it to me when I was probably like 10 years old. So
Nice.
yeah, I mean, it's commonly cited as one of the great heavy metal albums of all time. So I don't know. We'll see if it's my favorite later on, but but it's definitely up there.
Yeah, I mean, we got a lot of good albums here to discuss for sure. So the ranking of them, who knows? We'll see what happens, how it all unfolds here. Keep the suspense for everybody out there so we can keep them watching. All right. So next from there, obviously, unfortunately, this Master of Puppets would be the last album with Cliff Burton on bass, as when they were on a promotional tour of Sweden, tour bus accident, and Cliff Burton passed away during that accident, unfortunately. So they, took some time off that really, really hurt them as far as trying to promote the album, having something like this happen. It was like a travesty, but they marched on, they soldiered on, and they recruited Jason Newsted in the band, and Injustice for All was the result with the first album with Jason aboard. Came out 1988 September. It actually came out after the Monsters of Rock tour. If you remember, they did that Monsters of Rock tour with Van Halen, Scorpions, Dokken, and Kingdom Come, and they were second on the bill. They would go on second. So, Dokken headlined over Metallica at the time. Everybody was like in an uproar over that whole situation. And but you got to remember that Metallica was still, they were still up and coming. They had no new album out in 2 years, and the album actually came out after the tour was already over. But fear not, it still sold. That tour probably definitely helped this album. They During that tour they did play one song during that tour to give everybody a little preview of the album, as well as their usual classics. And Justice for All ended up hitting 8 times platinum. It's where we stand at the moment. Just another great album followed up after Master of Puppets. What do you like about this album?
Yeah, I like this album a lot. I think the obvious criticism is that Jason's bass is basically non-existent when you listen to it because they was basically hazing at the time, as they refer to it. They just turned the production, they turned the guitar so loud that you couldn't even hear who was playing on it. That's long been the criticism, but I think the material is among the strongest they've ever done.
Yeah, I'd have to agree on that one for sure. So they've definitely sold a lot of albums at this point, and it is only about to get even bigger as we come to August 12th, 1991, when this album came out. Yeah, you can't really see anything on it, can you? But
Nope.
that's known as the Black Album, folks. 16 times platinum as we speak, diamond status, the only diamond status out of the band's studio catalog here. Obviously the song that really started it all off, and the song you probably hear almost nonstop to this day wherever you go, Enter Sandman. That was the song that kicked the album off, and it definitely put this band, brought them to the upper echelon. It brought them out of the even people who listen to pop and all different other types of music took notice. Metallica gained a lot of fans with this album, even fans that weren't even fans of this genre. When you sell that many albums, obviously you're getting people from all over, and that really was something at that point in time. And right before this all happened, right before our famous grunge era kicked in. So who knows what to say, what would have happened if it got released like 2 years later when grunge was going all out? Would it have been as popular? Hard to say. But Black Album, what's your take on that one?
Yeah, this is definitely the album that gained a lot of fans, but it also lost a lot of the early fans at the same time. So because it's definitely not a thrash band metal album anymore, but I mean, they crossed over. They got the radio play. Like as you said, people who weren't even fans of metal at all became familiar with this music because it was so ubiquitous on the radio and everything. So,
Hmm.
but yeah, I like it, but it's definitely I don't feel the same as I do about the early records, but it's definitely good.
Yeah, I mean, I think on this one there's a little bit more filler as compared to the other albums because I think this is one where they ended up going the route of the CD and they started to try to fill up all the time by putting on as many tracks as they could. There's 12 tracks on this album. All right, so 1996 rolls around.
Yep.
We finally get another Metallica album. I don't know, that's weird. I always thought it was like earlier than that, but 1996, wow.
Took a while,
Load,
yeah.
Load comes out.
Yep.
So maybe they were smart taking all that time off with grunge and setting in.
Yeah.
Although, the album Load, it definitely really changed
Mm-hmm.
the direction of the band and their style. Um, regardless, you have a drop off of 16 times platinum and then you go down to 5 times platinum. But still, to maintain that and sell that many records for an album that is definitely not one of the more revered albums out of the band's catalog, that's actually pretty good selling that many albums.
Mm-hmm.
But I would assume most of those albums were probably bought when the album first came out, so no one
Yeah.
knew a lot about it at the time.
I think they bought it because it's Metallica. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Which pretty much happens, I would say, as time goes on here.
Yeah.
So Load, we get to see this thing in 96. What's your take on Load?
Well, it's okay. I went back and listened to it again in the last couple weeks, all the way through. I
Mhm.
hadn't really done that in a while, but I mean, there's some good stuff on here, but I mean, for me, it's not the kind of thrash I want from Metallica. It's more of like a metal slash blues style where they just kind of slowed the riffs down a little bit. But yeah, but it's definitely like that with the image change, they cut their hair and that wrangled all the fans up a little bit. So they went for,
Yeah. And then, oddly enough, another year later, we get another album by them finally, called Reload. So that came out in November of 97. Since it's gone 3 times platinum at this point, another number one album. That's one thing I've been skipping here. So actually, Black was the first number one album. Load was the second number one album, and then Reload is their third number one album. So that's
Mhm.
that's basically when the charts all changed on how the albums are ranked accordingly. But they sold the most albums that week, and that's why it's number one. So
Mhm.
what about Reload? What's your take
Yeah,
on that one?
I've always been of the mindset that they should have taken the best songs from each and just made one concise album. But clearly, the record company thought they would make more money by splitting it up. So, but because I mean, I don't think either album as a whole is kind of like the most succinct statement for the band. There's good stuff here and there. They should have just combined the best material together to make one good album.
Hmm.
But I do actually prefer Reload more than Load. I think overall the material's a little better.
Okay. All right, yeah. So we'll see what happens when we get to these rankings. So coming up next, now we land into 2003. So we've gone another 6 years without an album again,
Mm-hmm.
and this time Saint Anger rears itself here. Double platinum album. Um, this album really has taken a beating critically compared to any of the other albums in this band's catalog. And I would have to say justifiably so.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely and then we'll get into the when we get into the rankings, but Saint Anger, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I mean it's the only one I don't own, so I think that's pretty much tells you what you need to know about that. But I mean, I didn't. I was in high school when it came out, and I didn't like it then, and I still don't like it now. But I mean, I understand that the band was going through a lot of personal drama at the time, and the documentary came out, and you got to see just how dysfunctional they were. It was like the first time people had really seen the band that vulnerable, and like even Bob Rock had to play bass on the album because Jason was gone at that point. So
All right, and so we get another 5 years gap in between here, and finally we come up with Death Magnetic, which seems to be a more of a return to form for the band, as if Saint Anger didn't really exist. It's like it kind of skipped over, and each album, load, reload. Now Death Magnetic seems to be heading in the right direction. This one went double platinum, another number one. And by the way, Saint Anger probably it did reach number one, double platinum. But I have to say, just saying this up front, Saint Anger's got to probably be the worst double platinum album that reached number one in the history of music.
yeah, definitely up there.
I definitely can't think of another one that's that bad. But anyhow, so Death Magnetic, what was your take to that? Were you glad to see the?
I was excited when Death Magnetic came out. I bought it immediately and I listened to it a ton. There was a period, maybe the last 5 years, I hadn't listened to it as much, but I pulled it back out again recently. And I think the songs on it hold up pretty well, and they were kind of trending in the right direction, getting away from the abrasiveness of Saint Anger. But I think the only negative would be that the production on the original pressing of Death Magnetic wasn't the best. It was a little compressed, but they obviously it was Rick Rubin they brought in to do the production on the album. So, but
Right.
it's pretty good.
Mhm. And that brings us to the final album, or the most current album that's been released, and that came out in 2016, which would be 8 years after Death Magnetic. And here we are 6 years later, still waiting on the next Metallica album. But Hardwired to Self-Destruct, another number one lander here. Platinum, which, considering usually after 2016 and on, you don't see a lot of platinum albums, especially from legacy artists. It seems like for some reason it's really hard for a lot of these artists who at one time were selling records faster than they can print them. All of a sudden, now it's just, they don't sell as many. But it went platinum, so that was definitely a plus for the band. And Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I mean, I think that one, in my opinion, is similar to Death Magnetic in a lot of ways, but a few more songs on this one compared to Death Magnetic. What was your take on that?
Yeah, I bought Hardware the day it came out, and I think it's even better than Death Magnetic. It's definitely the closest they've come to kind of rekindling a little bit old Metallica fire, but it's definitely. I mean, even I saw them on that tour in 2017, and it was great. And so even when they're kind of like not putting out albums regularly, they're still a tremendous touring act. So
All right, so that's where we stand with the catalog right now. So now it's time to get down to the wire here, the hard wire. Let's get these albums ranked here and see how we match up here. What'd you get for the there's 10 of them all together, so we'll start off with your number 10.
yeah, my number 10 is Saint Anger, as people could probably guess. But I mean, the absence of Kirk Hammett guitar solos really kind of takes the fun out of the album for me. And I mean, the band, when you listen to it, it doesn't sound like they're really enjoying being a band at that point. So it's not fun for the listener, and it's not fun for the band to make. But
Yep, and that's also my number 10, obviously. The interesting thing is, I think inside the album you get the regular CD, and then you also get like a DVD.
mm-hmm.
And if you actually look and watch the DVD, it's actually a different mix. And I think if they would have put that mix on the album, maybe we would have had something a little bit better. I just feel that mix for that out for the video portion seems a lot better. I don't know. Maybe it's just
Yeah.
me.
I
I
mean,
don't.
and they have in the past few years they've actually played a couple songs live, so they're starting to bring it back a little bit now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, anyway, I could care less if they didn't
Yeah.
play anything from Saint Anger. I would be ecstatic. So yeah, so we agree on number 10. Let's see what number 9 brings us here.
My 9 is actually I have Load at number 9.
Okay.
And I mean, there are some good songs. I mean, King Nothing is good. They still play that on the radio quite a bit. And Until It Sleeps was a good song. But I think the deep cut here maybe is the Outlaw Torn, which is the last song on the album. They have played that live quite a bit in recent years, but if I'm going to sit down and listen to the whole album, it's not really. I don't know. There's not a lot that stands out to me. I know "Hero of the Day" was a big radio hit at the time too, but I don't really like that song that much. I just think it's kind of a sterile ballad for them. But that's
Okay.
yeah.
All right. So I hear you on that. Unfortunately, my number 9 is actually Hardwired to Self-Destruct here. To tell you the truth, these numbers 6 through 10, well, 6 through 9, let's say, pretty much are neck and neck. It's just a shift. Maybe one or two more songs could have made a difference on these albums for me. But with Hardwired to Self-Destruct, the songs that I really like, Atlas Rise, I really care for. That's a good one. And Here Comes the Revenge. So those are the two main ones that really stuck out for me. Murder One wasn't bad. The other ones, it just sounded like Metallica. Nothing that really stood out for me on that one, but except for those few that I mentioned. And it seems like for Death Magnetic, they pared it down to 10. I don't know if that's if they had any more songs in the can or not for that album, but sometimes trimming it down, getting rid of some of the fat, sometimes that makes an album a little bit better. So they have 12 songs on Hardwired, but there was a bigger gap in between years of release and stuff. So, but Hardwired, it's an okay album. It's decent. It's not never going to put it near. Unfortunately, it is near Saint Anger in my ranking, but it's just not as good as the other ones. That's all for me. For me. So that brings us to number 8.
Yep. My number 8 is Reload. So it's slightly a step above Load, but I mean, like the Memory Remains is a good song. Fixer is good. That's one they've actually brought back in recent years into the live set. Fuel was a big hit off this album, but again, it's pretty. I mean, the production is pretty much identical to Load, and the songs are structurally they're the same. So there's really not much. As I said earlier, they should have just taken the best material off each album and made one complete. But that whole era of Metallica is, it's people are skeptical of the switch in tone for a reason. So I mean, I don't think it represents the best that the band had at the offer at the time. But
Yeah. All right, so that's your number 8. That brings me to mine, which is going to be Death Magnetic. Only 10 songs on this album, but it feels like at least they trimmed out the fat on it. It doesn't, instead of trying to cram 14, 15 songs on there, there's not really a need to do that. I think going forward, a lot more bands, I noticed the older school bands, a lot of them are now only making less songs on an album, which really I think overall makes the album stand out a little bit more because you don't have a lot of filler on it or anything like that. So Death Magnetic, obviously that was just your life, kicks off the album in great style. The Day That Never Comes, that's another one that stood out for me. The rest of it, I can take it or leave it. Nothing really for me that really stood out too much compared to those two songs. Those were the ones that really stood out. All right, so number 7.
yeah, my number 7 is Death Magnetic. So again, I think it was a step in the right direction for them at the time, 2008. I mean, I remember when The Day That Never Comes came out, they played it on the radio all the time. At least I listened to like 97.7 out of St. Catharines. They really got behind that song. And then after that came Cyanide. That was a pretty big single, which they played live quite a bit. Broken, Beaten, Scarred was next. That's a pretty good song. And then after that, I mean, there's some good stuff here, but the production could have been better. I mean, it sounds a little compressed, but it was kind of a good omen for what was to come later on. I think I prefer the Hardwired a little more over this album, but at least it wasn't Saint Anger again. So
Yeah, exactly. All right, so basically it looks like me and you just switched our load and reload with our two current later albums in the catalog. So my number 7 is Load. So similar to yours, Load was the weaker of the two. Um, 2x4, Ain't My Bitch, Poor Twisted Me. Those are the ones that stood out for me. Until It Sleeps. I tried listening, like you said, Hero of the Day got a lot of airplay and a couple of these other ones, but for me, they just didn't really do anything for me. Matter of fact, this is one of those albums I didn't just write out and buy when it came out. I probably got it a couple years down the road in the bargain bin or something like that, because it just wasn't, not a lot of good things were said about the album too much there at the time of its release. A lot of people were really disappointed it wasn't Black number 2, Black Part 2, because you just came out with that mega album and then you follow it up, make people wait, and you follow it up with this, and unfortunately, like you said, it lost a lot of fans.
Mm-hmm.
So that brings us to number 6.
All right. Number 6, I have Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I think overall, I think it was an improvement over Death Magnetic. I really like Spit Out the Bone, which closes out the album. That's one of the heaviest songs from the later catalog that they put out. And Atlas Rise was big live. Moth into Flame was pretty big on the radio. So they definitely, now that we're dead, had some airplay too. They definitely came back with some more ambitious song structures, and they seemed like they were maybe getting back into the metal that they used to play slightly, because it seemed like, to me at least, almost seemed like they lost interest in the thrash metal they used to play for a long time. I don't know if they just got tired of it, but they got kind of complacent and didn't really push themselves to be the band that they used to be. So
Okay, yeah, that definitely is a good analogy right there. Good analysis. All right, let's see what we got here. So that's number 6 for you, and mine is Reload. Um, Reload, I think the album actually starts off not too bad. You got Fuel, then you got The Memory Remains, which are two radio staples. Um, then The Unforgiven too, it's not the regular Unforgiven, but it's all right. I actually like that version. It's good. And the other song that really kind of like a deep cut, Low Man's Lyric, that one I really got into. Definitely one of the better songs from the later Metallica catalog here, right there. But other than that, a step above Load, like you said. But it is what it is, and like you said, I would definitely agree with you on your take of taking the best songs from each album, cutting it down to maybe like 10 songs, and you would have probably, it might, it would probably be a pretty good album there, definitely. All right, so now we're going top 5. This is old school. What do you
all
got
right,
for
yeah,
5?
yeah. My number 5 is the Black Album,
Oh,
which I like it, but I mean, like, especially the first, like, 5 or 6 songs on the album you probably never need to hear again because they've been played to death by the radio. But I mean, I still like the interesting thing they did last year for the 30th anniversary of the record was they played the album in reverse during the live shows, and I think that's kind of an interesting way. It almost made me rethink the album a little bit, like hearing it in reverse order. Because when they played it live, I went back and played the record in reverse order, starting with side 4, and it kind of freshens things up a little bit because some of those later songs, they're not like perfect, but it definitely puts the album in a different perspective when you hear the songs that you don't hear all the time. Like the God That Failed is good. Don't Tread on Me is a pretty good song. Through the Never, there's some pretty good material there, but it's definitely the most commercial and the mainstream album that, like, the people who didn't know anything about the first 4 albums, they pretty much became Metallica fans based on this record. So I mean, they cashed in, they took it to the bank, and then I don't know if maybe they just made so much money off that album that they just kind of felt like they didn't have to put as much effort into the later albums. But that's, for a while, that's kind of how it felt. But
yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of stuff happened in between those years and
Mhm.
everything, but
Yeah, but when you think about it, like when it came out in '91, it came out like Nevermind from Nirvana came out within a month, 10 from Pearl Jam came out. Like Guns N' Roses put out both the Use Your Illusion albums at the same time. Like everything, all those major albums came out in a small, short period of time. So it's still
Mhm.
pretty interesting to think about. But
Definitely. All right, so that was your number 5. Mine is actually going to be Kill 'Em All. Um, yeah, this album, like you said, the early real thrashy. It, they kick off their career with this type of album here, and you really don't see that all much the form of what they were doing on this album. They kind of moved up and progressed from there. Obviously Whiplash, one of the big songs in their set list, usually Seek and Destroy, No Remorse. Those are the songs that really do it for me. Four Horsemen, another great song. You can't go wrong. Like I said, this album's definitely the one that put them on the map, justifiably so. And they just grew from there. And so that should take you to your number 4.
yeah, my number 4 is Kill 'Em All.
Okay.
I mean, it's a great debut album. I mean, the thrash metal template was laid out right from the beginning. I mean, Kirk Hammett came in from Exodus, and there's always been hotly debated about just how much input Dave Mustaine had on these songs, or how much they changed between the time that he left to the time they actually made the record. Because I know in the media he'll always take credit for everything that they did on this album, but you know that's which I know, like the Mechanics was ended up becoming the Four Horsemen. That's one that usually gets talked about a lot, which is a great song on the album. And hit the lights starts off killer. There's the Anesthesia is the great Cliff Burton bass solo with a wah pedal, which is definitely something that they've tried to recreate live with Rob in recent years. But yeah, I mean, Seek and Destroyed is another great song. So I, it's definitely one I like a lot, but it's not as good as the what's to come later. So
Yeah. I mean, it was still solid. At number 4, that's still a solid album, and they're good ranking for the album for sure. And number 5 for me. So we pretty much were right near the ballpark on that one. Which takes me to my number 4, which probably going to surprise some people, but I'm going with And Justice for All. This album came out in '89. Um, like I said, they played a song off of here before the album actually came out during that Monsters of Rock show. And, it gave us a good taste of what we were expecting, and obviously Blackened definitely started things off in the right mode, just kind of the way Battery starts out Master, pretty forensic and fast and all out, going nuts. Um, and then there's of course the song that obviously that people say they sold out on, but one, that got a lot of airplay. That really helped set up for the Black Album. Really, that's the song that really started to get noted. That's where they really started getting noticed by a lot of these people that maybe weren't fans of the band or that even that genre. And then you got good stuff like The Shortest Straw, Harvester of Sorrow, just a really good album from head to toe. And definitely one that it's not in the top 3, but it's close. Definitely for me. So that's number 4 for me, and then that leaves us to our top 3. What do you
yeah,
got for 3?
3 could surprise people, but I'm putting Master of Puppets number 3. I think it's I mean it's commonly cited as the best heavy metal album of all time by a lot of publications. I mean, it's good for good reason, but I mean side 1 definitely is better than side 2. I mean, Orion is a great instrumental. Damage Inc. is great. Sanitarium is a classic that they still play live. But I don't know, maybe it's only because I've heard it so much that I don't really need to listen to it that often anymore. But I mean, there's really nothing negative to say about it. It's just I prefer the 2 more albums a little bit more than that. So
All right. So, yep, my Master of Puppets still to come. So we're number 3 for me is going to be the Black Album. Um, this is the first Metallica album to really have like more than 10 songs on it. Matter of fact, except for the Kill 'Em All, none of the albums had 10 songs up until this album, and they ended up putting 12 on here. And I think that's kind of why I think it's, for me, it's a little bit low. Well, it's number 3. But there's a little bit of filler in there towards the end. Those are the songs that I'm a little not much of a fan on, but the album definitely kicks off in good shape with Enter Sandman, Sabbath True, The Unforgiven, Nothing Else Matters, Don't Tread on Me, Wherever I May Roam, yeah, man, what a way to start an album off with all those songs like all 8 in a row like that. Just like you said, it was cool how they played it different when they started doing it in reverse, which really, yeah, that would definitely change the whole, feel of the album for sure if they did the tracks differently, and that's one thing bands always, I'm not sure who usually comes up with a lot of these things. A lot of times it's the record company, it all depends on choosing the order of how to put songs on an album. That definitely has a impact on sometimes a lot of things about the album for sure. If you went like every other track, stuck some of those later songs in the middle of some of the earlier ones, then you would totally get a different feel to the album.
Mm-hmm.
But like out of the first 8 songs, usually you don't even hit the skip button, you know. So yeah, Black Album for me, number 3. So that gives us our top 2.
Yeah, 2 for me is Injustice for All. I
Okay.
mean, besides not really being able to hear the bass on the album, I think the songs, from a construction and songwriting perspective, I think Metallica really peaked with a lot of their ideas on this album. Just thematically, the lyrics were really deep, both politically and socially complex. I mean, Blackened is obviously great. The title track, it comes in almost 10 minutes. It's an epic song. It doesn't matter how many times I hear it, I still think it's one of their best songs. Just the lyrics, the guitar solos is one of Kirk Hammett's most notable. The video that they made for MTV was a classic back then. So, and I mean, it's a long album, and it's a lot to get through. Like when you sit down and listen to it from front to back. But they also have like even some progressive elements just with the shifting arrangements and the time signatures and everything. It's a deep album to get into, but it's definitely rewarding.
All right, yeah. Definitely number 2. I had mine at number 4, so definitely in the upper echelon of the catalog where it justifiably deserves to be. So that leads us to my number 2, which is going to be Ride the Lightning. So basically, this is the album that I really first got noticed for me, because it started getting some airplay, before 97 Rock disintegrated. If you remember,
Mm-hmm.
it was around till about early 85 when they pulled the plug and changed the format on 97 Rock. And they used to have these metal shows on. They used to get this metal show. I think it was the one with Charlie. Was it Charlie Kendall, the guy that used to host metal show? I'm not sure. It was one of those guys. And that was like a syndicated show where
Mm-hmm.
they would play all these songs, heavy, hard stuff on Friday nights for like 2 hours. And then Kyle Russo from Buffalo's 97 Rock would do his metal meltdown thing show there from like 2 hours on Fridays. And he would play all kinds of rare stuff like, just Jag Panzer, all kinds of unique and stuff. And that's when I first started hearing a lot of this album from stuff back in those days when he would do that. And obviously the song that I really fell in love with was Creeping Death. I mean, I don't think it gets any better than that from Metallica. That particular song is the song that defines the band, and that's the song that really stands out and strikes the chord there. I mean, there's nothing in the world to see this band open up with Creeping Death, because the only downside is after they play it, it's playing the best song first isn't always actually a good thing, but it definitely gets you going for sure in concert. And then obviously Fade to Black, great song for When the Bell Tolls. This album is just chock full of some really great songs. So, and that's why for me it peaks at number 2.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming you got a number 1 album
Yep.
for us here. What do you
Yeah.
got?
My number one is Ride the Lightning. That's that from the moment we decided we were going to do the Metallica list. I always knew that was going to be my number one. It's just always been my favorite. I mean, they kicked the album off with "Fight Fire with Fire," which is one of their best openers, and it ride the full side one of "Fight Fire with Fire," "Ride the Lightning," "For Whom the Bell Tolls," and "Fade to Black" is just perfect. And then with side two, "Creeping Death" is there. "Trapped Under Ice" is a great deep cut, and the "Call of Cthulhu" is a killer instrumental that it might be my favorite instrumental they've done. So to me, there's not a wasted moment on this album. It's just they're just fast and furious the whole way through. So
Yeah, it's amazing how different the album is from Kill 'Em All. You basically they just really up the ante and really just the songwriting, the playing, the vocals. It's just all really came together right there and took off in a whole other direction. And then yeah, definitely, I definitely my number two, your number one. It's hard sometimes when some of these albums are that good to pick
mhm.
between them. But like you said, for you, you knew right away what it was going to be for you, and I knew right away what it was going to be for my number one, and obviously that's Master. That's the one that I just really love this album from beginning to end. Not a bad cut anywhere. Kicks off with Battery, followed by Master of Puppets. You mentioned Sanitarium, a classic track, definitely in my book, as well as the underappreciated Disposable Heroes. That's the song for me. That's the gem of the album. That they seems like, I mean, they play it here and there, but it just that's the song for me that really you know besides the usual Master, Sanitarium. Those are the three big ones on this album for me. And then Leper Messiah, the thing that should not be. This album just it's not a bad cut, a bad. There's not even a bad note on this album. It's just great album all the way through. It's one of those albums that you could play probably 10 times in a row and not get sick of.
Mhm.
Not that I would. There's too much other music to listen to, but
Yeah.
if I had to, I could do it, and I wouldn't like the 10th listen as good as the first listen for sure. So yeah, so that's our rankings here. Did you have anything else to add about the catalog or anything here?
I pulled out some other stuff that I had here. Like this is an EP they put out called Beyond Magnetic. It was contained all the outtakes from Death Magnetic that didn't make the actual album. There's actually some good stuff on there. There's a few that I would switch out with some of the stuff that ended up making the album, but it's if you haven't heard it, it's worth going back and listening to.
Is it different cuts or different takes on some of the cuts?
It's four different songs.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So
All right. And what's your take on like their version of Turn the Page?
Turn the Page, I used to like it a lot in the '90s, but then I just kind of, I mean, it's okay, but it's definitely one you still hear on the radio quite a bit.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
And what about Garage Inc?
The Garage Inc. I like. I mean, I think there's some pretty good stuff on there. Like they do the some Misfits stuff. I'm not a big Misfits fan, but the way Metallica does it makes it engaging, and they do a really good cover of "Tuesday's Gone" from Leonard Skinner down there. That's
Hmm.
pretty cool. It's not one you never hear them do acoustic too often, but it's pretty good.
Yeah, Whiskey in the Jar too. That's one of the big ones the radio
Yeah,
always used to play. I really like that one too.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, we only did the regular studio albums, but that
yeah.
definitely deserves to be mentioned. It
Mhm.
definitely, if you're a big Metallica fan or you want to hear something a little different, definitely dig that one out. Try to dig that one out. Garage Inc.
Yeah.
Definitely a pretty cool album. And then hopefully this will get people ready. There you go. Hopefully
Mhm.
this will get people ready for the big concert coming up out at Highmark Stadium on August 11th. Um, it should be a great show. Been a while since Metallica's played here. What was it, 2017 or 16?
I think it was 18.
18. Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
it's been
didn't
a
hear
little
about
while. So and plus we're like one of only two cities where they're actually doing tour dates in other than festivals and stuff like
it.
that. So us and Pittsburgh are going to be the two big shows here. So should be an interesting set list to see what they pull out and come up with, as they're one of these bands that always change things up pretty much on a nightly basis, kind of like Pearl Jam does. And that's why I appreciate these type of bands, because they don't go from city to city playing the same set night after night after night. You don't know what to expect exactly, which is great, because you're going to get,
Yeah.
probably you're going to get Creeping Death, you're going to get like One, you're going to get Master of Puppets, but it's some of these other songs that they dig out, which is really cool.
Mhm. Yep.
Because you just never know the order they're going to play them in either.
Yeah. I mean, with as inconsistent as they've been on record in the last 30 years, live they're always good. So
Yeah, you can't go wrong when you're going to go see Metallica live, no doubt about that. All right, well, that pretty much puts a wrap on this episode. And so just to recap, Dave, his site is musicandotherdrugs.com, and he has a lot of reviews and interviews up there. Anything recent you want to push or pump?
I just posted a review of the Rage Against the Machine Buffalo show from last week, and I'll have a interview coming up with the guitar player from Lillian Axe later this week. So
Oh, cool. All right, so something a little forward to look forward to there. If you get a chance, check out his site. A lot of interesting stuff on there. A lot of interviews he's done over the years. A lot of great articles on some of the reviews. You got some album reviews on there too. I take it as well.
yep.
All right, so sounds good. And then stop back shortly, because we're gonna have some more rankings as we go through the archives here. Just to give you a little bit of a idea of what to expect. We're gonna have Robert Plant solo coming up here. Should be up in a little while. We're going to have that all set there. And we're looking at doing Boston, ranking the Boston albums. And there's a few other things coming up here. So stay tuned. You never know what to expect here. We're gonna pull a Metallica live and pull some of the unexpected stuff out here to make it more exciting and keep things fresh.
Yep. Sounds good.
All right. All right then. Signing off. We'll see you guys. Take care.